You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey there, Days fans. It's Belinda from Soap Dirt. And in case you don't remember, I want to refresh you about why exactly Lucas Horton is behind bars in Statesville prison and why the get out of jail free card that he just got offered from Detective Harris Michaels might not go exactly the way they talked about because of one particular problem, and that problem is DA EJ DiMera. So let's talk about why Lucas is cooling his heels in prison and why one person in power may want him to serve his whole sentence despite him agreeing to be a confidential informant. So Lucas Horton was convicted and sent to Statesville prison for kidnapping Sami Brady. But it's not all cut and dried, and it was actually quite a while between him committing the crime and him being convicted of the crime. It was a very twisted scenario, honestly, even for Days of Our Lives. So back in August 2021, EJ DiMera had just thrown his wife Sami out of the mansion because of a letter given to him by Nicole that revealed Sami had slept with Lucas. Kristen had found out Kristen had locked Sami and Lucas down in the underbelly of the DiMera mansion, and while they were down there together, they did the deed, and then Kristen wrote a letter to tell EJ about it, and then I think Sami got a hold of the letter before it reached EJ, and then she was burning it. Lucas got it out of the fire, and then it wound up in EJ's hands. So EJ was done with his wife, and Sami accused Lucas of pulling the letter out of the fire to give to EJ. Of course, Lucas was kind of able to deny it because he didn't do it directly. He had his brother Philip hand the letter to Nicole, who then handed it to EJ. So he felt like, oh, it didn't come directly from me. Lucas, of course, thought it was his chance to have Sami back with him, but she said she was going to fight for her marriage to EJ and was certain he'd forgive her. And the same day she said that, August 11th, 2021, Sami was kidnapped on the doorstep of the mansion. The only sign left behind was this necklace EJ had gifted her while they were over in Italy. So all we saw at the time was a black gloved hand putting a cloth over her face, some chloroform. And there was a bunch of months of who kidnapped Sami, where everybody had all kinds of theories, from Kristen to Nicole to EJ himself. And Sami was off screen for months, and you may know that Sami Brady actress Allison Sweeney has a lot of other irons in the fire. She's got her Murder, She Baked series. She does a lot of other non-Days of Our Lives stuff. So it was from August until late November that she went unseen, and then all of a sudden we got her back on screen. She's in this little room where she's being held, this big giant guard. It was a very kind of grim thing. They were threatening not to feed her, all this kind of stuff. So Sami then attacked a kidnapper, got the better of him, tied him up, got his phone. She called Lucas. And Lucas had her use the map function to tell him where she's being held, and then he raced over there to play hero. It was a couple of weeks later, maybe a full week later, early December 2021, by the time Lucas reached her. And Lucas thought by rescuing her, he was going to get her love and her cuddles. And at this point, remember, even viewers didn't know that Lucas had kidnapped her. So Sami was actually certain at the point that she got free that it was Nicole Walker who had kidnapped her for revenge. But other people were like, but why would she kidnap you when, she's already been seeing EJ? So as soon as the doctor checked her out, Sami made a beeline to the mansion and, of course, found EJ in bed with Nicole. Lucas joked at the time if he'd known she was going to run right to EJ, he would have just left her in that room where he found her. And their daughter, Allie Horton, did not find that funny at all. And I think Lucas was maybe not even joking at that point. Sami and EJ briefly reconciled, but then it fell apart when Lucas successfully framed EJ for the kidnapping with a little assistance from Chad DiMera. They set up a fake paper trail to make it look like EJ had paid the kidnapper. Sami, of course, was furious that EJ did this. She was convinced he did. And she left town with Lucas late in 2021. And EJ was arrested and sent to prison for the crime that Lucas committed. So in early 2022, Sami and Lucas came back to Salem, By then, EJ had been freed by Belle Black's efforts and he had taken her to bed. Lucas proposed to Sami and they were planning a February 2022 wedding. At that point, the only people who knew Lucas was the real kidnapper were Lucas himself, Kate Roberts, and Chad DiMera. Abigail had found out, but then she was murdered like the same day she found out before she said anything to anyone. Lucas was actually a suspect for a moment in her slaying because he'd gotten blackout drunk that night. So Sami and Lucas were at the altar saying their I do's when a grieving Chad busted into the church and revealed that Lucas had been lying and was the real kidnapper. That kind of put a little damper on the whole wedding ceremony, and Sami ran right over to EJ while Lucas was being taken to the cop shop. But she found EJ in bed with Belle, and she freaked out. But then she told EJ he was right, and she knows it was Lucas that did the deed. In August of 2022, Lucas pled guilty to second-degree kidnapping, partially because it was the only way to get Allie Horton's forgiveness, and Sami left town again. Lucas got a pretty light sentence, all things considered, 3 years, so he should be free in August of 2025. Right now, it's January 2024, so he served about half of his sentence. And by the way, if you didn't know, this is not Lucas's first stint in prison. He was in Statesville back in 2007 because he shot EJ in the back when EJ and Sami were at the altar on their wedding day. This is important to know because Harris offered Lucas a sweet deal to skip the last half of his sentence, walk out a free man if he will dig up some dirt on whoever's running the drug ring out of Statesville. Of course, the viewers, we all know it's Clyde Weston, but the cops don't know it yet. So usually the state attorney general or federal prosecutor or the local DA has to sign off on any deals cut with confidential informants that are going to get them out of prison early. Harris made the offer because Paulina told him to crack down on the drug problem. The problem is EJ DiMera is not going to want to sign off on this deal. And I mean, why would he? He'd be in prison right now for Sami's kidnapping if Lucas had his way. And sure, EJ and Lucas had years of doing bad things to each other while competing for Sami, but I feel like Lucas kind of has a leg up with the shooting in the back and the whole kidnapping and framing thing. So we'll see. Even if EJ tries to refuse the deal, Paulina Price could order him to accept it, and if he doesn't, she can fire him. I mean, Brady Black and Stephen DiMera both want her to fire EJ because he's using his position as DA to punish people that he's got a personal vendetta against, and that is definitely an abuse of power. So if you wondered why Lucas was sitting in prison and just couldn't remember, that's why. He wasn't charged for the frame job against EJ. I mean, that should have been a whole charge too. But he cut a plea deal by confessing and saying he was guilty, and that's why he only got 3 years. Next week, though, Lucas has a life and death moment when he is attacked in prison. And all of this is basically a rerun from showrunner Rerun, which is Ron Carlovati's nickname because he loves to repeat plots. Back in 2008, see if this sounds familiar, Lucas was in prison for shooting EJ, and the feds offered him a deal to work for them as a confidential informant to find out who was dealing drugs in Salem, and said if he did it, he'd get out of jail early. So he agreed to the deal, and he was attacked back then too. So if this plot now sounds familiar, there's a good reason why. It is a complete redo from one from 15 years back. So let me know in the comments, do you want to see Lucas out of prison early? And do you think EJ will try and keep him behind bars despite the sweet deal that Harris offered? Let me know what you think. Be sure and drop your comments. Definitely click subscribe if you haven't already, and come back soon because we are here talking days, 7 days a week. And as always, it's Belinda from Soap Dirt.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.